Chapter 55. Power. As we have seen, the number of laws given to us in the Torah is limited, 613 by the rabbinic reckoning, fewer by Christian counts. Again, these laws are mainly enforceable by God, not by man. Those that can be enforced by man are, for the most part, placed in the hands of the family, the specifically religious agency, or the state. They do not empower any institution or agency to control man and life. The primary solution to problems is not by means of coercion, revolution, or punishment, but by means of regeneration. Force is not abolished because it is needed in a fallen world, but it is limited. A culture that relies on force to maintain itself is already in a process of decay and dissolution. A civilization is constructed on the premises of a religious faith, and it wanes when the faith wanes. As the faith that constitutes a civilization begins to disappear, what replaces it is original sin, the belief implicit and explicit in Genesis 3:5, every man has his own knower or determiner of good and evil, right and wrong, of law and morality. When men play God, they are unable to regenerate any man. They cannot, by their fiat will, make of any man a new creation. They must rather rely on compulsion, from compulsory education to strict controls on every man. The state seeks to recreate man by means of coercion. Thus, the state seeks ever-increasing power. First, in order to play God more successfully, and second, it has no other means of changing man other than by the exercise of total power. This means that the non-Christian state, because it exemplifies the presumption of Genesis 3:5, will play God by a continual increase in power. George Orwell, in the novel 1984, saw the end of the state's power as the naked exhibition of total power, a boot stamping on a human face forever. The non-Christian state will increase its power as long as it can, because its purpose is the imitation of God, and this it seeks to express by means of raw and naked power. For Aristotle, man is a political animal whose potentialities and power can only be realized in the state. It is held that power expresses itself in order, and order in justice. Christianity, by proclaiming to the Roman world the gospel equally to the powerful and the weak, shattered its dreams of power, order, and justice. These, in their true form, came from the triune God, not from nature nor the state. The world did not create order, rather it received it as it did justice. The laws of God set forth justice, not the emperors nor the philosophers. The determination of man and of all human empires, Augustine held, is by the sovereign God and his providence. All power comes from God, and all power rightly used is according to God's law. Man, without God, seeks to expand his power exponentially, whereas man under God seeks to place his entire being under the law of God. Statist power will increase and develop to the degree that the state and its peoples are not Christian. The non-Christian who wants to limit the power of the state will seek then to increase his own. Humanistic libertarianism is an exceptionally good critic of state power, especially in the economic realm, but it then warps its own position too commonly by replacing the power of the state with the power of the individual to be lawless sexually. Homosexual freedom has become basic to all too many libertarians. The Marquis de Sade pursued the logic of libertarianism or anarchism relentlessly. Total freedom for the individual means total power to do anything. Every man as his own God means every man as his own law and judge. Karl Marx understood that this anarchism undermined socialism and communism, which presuppose a common order, and hence his bitter attack on Max Stirner for his radical anarchism. Without God and his law, man and the state will expand their power ceaselessly. Total statism and total anarchy are the outcomes. The New Testament word exousia is translated from the Greek as either authority or power. The statement of Romans 13:1, "For there is no power but of God," can also be rendered, for there is no authority but of God. The word can also be rendered jurisdiction. In 1 Corinthians 11:10, exousia refers to a woman's head covering as her authority and power. Very clearly, power in the Bible comes from God and has authority in terms of his law word. When man attempts to exercise power or authority apart from God, he embarks on a path that is self-destructive. Proverbs 8:36. Modern theology and philosophy has reduced God at best to an idea. In this it betrays its Hellenic ancestry. It is accordingly antinomian because an idea in the Platonic sense is an abstract concept, and so too is law, not the word of the living and omnipotent God. In Rome, law and government came from the state, not God. Under the Emperor Valentinian, codes for the various merchants were imposed on all. The medical care of workers was provided. Education was more strictly controlled by the state. Total power was becoming identified with the state. As against this, Romans 13:1 held that all power and or authority come from God. What Paul there asserted did not exalt the state, but placed it firmly under God. This is a very important aspect of Romans 13:1. A man can disagree with the state on many issues while still holding to the priority of the state. To hold, however, that in everything all power and authority can only come from God is to undermine the supremacy and independency of the state. Furthermore, if in all things man and the state are totally limited by God's power and authority, then man and the state have freedom to act only in terms of God's law word. The sovereignty of the state means the sovereignty of its power and law. The sovereignty of God necessitates the sovereignty of his law and power. One cannot truly affirm the sovereignty of God and deny the sovereignty of his law. To deny the law is to deny the lawgiver and to reduce him to, at best, an influence, not the ultimate power. In any system of thought, power and authority will accrue to whatever is ultimate in that system. If it be the state, then the state will be God walking on earth. If it be the God of Scripture, then all power and all authority can belong only to God in any ultimate sense. Aristotle held that justice is the true principle of order in a society and the only true source of cohesion. He began his politics by declaring the state to be the highest good and the one, quote, which embraces all the rest, end quote. He held that the citizen belongs to the state. Since the state is the highest good, for Aristotle, man's hope is in the state. Given non-Christian premises other than anarchism, the state will only increase its powers because only so can it increase its power to do good. On the other hand, the state under God's law diminishes the powers it possesses and increases human freedom. What has been said with regard to the states and God's law applies also to the church. Church law has become a jungle of regulations which protect the freedom of this church from God's law and from doctrinal fidelity, while giving it license to betray its calling at every turn. It is necessary to recognize that the departure of civil governments from God's law has led to the criminalizing of the state. The state seeks freedom from responsibility to the degree it seeks freedom from God. One of the problems of the 20th century has been narco-terrorism. Marxist states in particular entered into the illicit narcotics trade or controlled it to finance their terrorist activities. Several responsible writers have documented this development. Other agencies of the state have devised their strategies for independent financing. Properties are seized on drug raids, even if no drugs are found in the house, boat, automobile or plane. The same is true where environmental rules are suspected of being broken, even if no violations are discovered. These and other forms of seizures have in common one fact. They provide financing for an agency of state independent of the taxpayer and any legislative body. All over the world, this kind of enterprise is in operation today. A few efforts have been made by some legislators to curtail such activities, But these attempts are dangerous, and the heads of state can easily be overthrown by these increasingly independent and powerful agencies. These agencies have become new Praetorian guards who can destroy the heads of state at will. This development should not surprise us. As the state plays God, it divorces itself more and more from responsibility to the people, to God, or to man. Rome, as it became an empire, retained the forms of a republic. It gave the illusion that little had changed when the changes were, in reality, radical and thoroughgoing. The same constitution ostensibly governs the United States as a century ago, but it is a radically different country and governed less by the President and Congress and more by bureaucracies without a fixed tenure. As a result, bureaucratic fiats are more commonly enforced than constitutional law. Laws convey the meaning of moral imperatives. Bureaucratic rules and regulations are experimental, supposedly, and therefore unlikely to convey the meaning of eternal truths and laws. With too many people, there is more anger over the warranted death penalty for murder than at the unwarranted seizures by the state of money and property. Fallen man's dream is to be as God, and so he is tolerant of efforts by the state to pursue that same dream. His hope is in unlimited power as the solution to his problems, and his imagination is given to this dream. God's law has a limited control over man. 613 laws, most not enforceable by the state, should appeal to him, but in fact, God's law repels him. It limits his aggressive freedoms against God and men while increasing his freedom to do good, to prosper, and to live in peace. But this is not the freedom men want. This is a creaturely freedom. Men want, rather, the freedom to play God. While rarely admitting it, a few will at times say openly that they want an anarchic freedom, a freedom outside the law. How else can we account for the vogue in intellectual circles for the Marquis de Sade? In the New Testament, one word, the Greek exousia, means both power and authority. In English, only one of the 9 meanings allies the word to legal or official authority and right. The association of the word power with electricity enforces the separation of power from morality, at the same time as morality is seen more and more not as an eternally true form of thinking and behaviour, but as a matter of the personal choice of a lifestyle suitable to us. Power becomes also more and more impersonal and divorced from law. Because the moral foundations, the theological premises of law have been eroded, power has increasingly replaced law.